Good afternoon, everyone. I am Beverly Bell with Interlink Relocation Resources and Rental Relocation, Inc. On behalf of myself, our president, James Bilderback, and our co-sponsors, Jill Nicely of ACE Relocation Atlas Van Lines and Jennifer Bafford of AFR Furniture Rental, we would like to welcome you to our 7th Mobility and Talent Management Roundtable. This is just part of our continued effort for bringing together HR and mobility professionals for the purpose of collaboration and exchange of best practices, all while sharing industry-related updates within an educational platform. So, as we prepare to address this very first topic, I would like to bring up on the screen 2 industry professionals that are joining us today to elaborate on the challenges and driving factors faced within the household good move component of every relocation. First, I want to introduce Mike Mcgill. Hi, Mike. Mike has 22 years of experience within the transportation industry, the last 18 of which have been spent in management and leadership roles within Mills Van Lines and the ACE Relocation family of companies. We also have Kathleen Baker. Kathleen has been in the household good industry, in the DSP services side, which destination services provider, and in the full service relocation space for nearly 25 years, currently with our own team at Interlink Relocation Resources and Rental Relocation. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Bev. We're excited to be on board here for this.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. So if Alex wouldn't mind removing me from this center stage, I would love to just stay focused right on Kathleen and Mike. So, Mike, when people are actually thinking about moving and storage, what all does that actually mean?
You know, when people think about moving and storage, they think of packing boxes and loading a truck and delivering to a destination residence. In reality, though, there are different schools of thought on how to execute a move. Some carriers subscribe to a geographic service delivery model where they may have a team at origin packing and loading the truck, have the truck go to destination, then have a different team at destination to unload and unpack. And other carriers subscribe to a pack load haul approach where the crew would stay with the transferee from start to finish. At the end of the day, there's really no single solution for all clients. Buyers of our services commonly have to figure out what the right fit is for them.
Well, can you explain the differences between these models?
Sure. So, you know, when you look at the pack load haul approach, it's locking up team members throughout the course of a move, including the packing of the boxes, loading of the truck, driving to destination, unloading, unpacking. But it's the continual staffing of the same crew throughout. If you go with the other approach, the geographic model, you might have dedicated teams in each market that are taking care of those services as they go from market to market. So if you're moving from Atlanta to New York, you might have a team of movers in Atlanta that are handling the packing and the loading, and then a team in New York that are taking care of the unloading and unpacking.
Very interesting. And so for you, Kathleen, from an RMC perspective, how important is a carrier vetting process? Can you share maybe what that might look like?
Absolutely. And for us, and I'm sure for any provider, it's really important. These are extension partners, as I guess we'd want to look at it. But some of the things that we do look for, you know, in addition to the communication level, do the dynamics fit between the two companies to make sure that they're mirroring what we're looking for and what we're looking for and expect. Some very important aspects that we're looking for is that it is that pack, load, and haul aspect, so that single driver is there from the start to finish. It gives helps in the stress level of the families that are relocating to know that that driver is going to be there from the start to the finish. They also know what happened at origin, so when they get to destination, that really can help get a jump and be proactive in that end. Also, what's really important is their traffic lanes. We're really looking at that relationship with that particular agent. And if we are selecting traffic lanes that don't fit their model, it could get thrown into the van lines, and we don't know who's going to be hauling it then, and we don't have relationships with those hauling agents like we do with we call the booking agent. And so it's really important to understand what their traffic lanes are, where they're strong at, so we can make sure that the shipments that are coming through to them will match that level. Another area, obviously, is quality scores and drivers' ratings. Those are huge importance on our end. We're looking for quality when we're dealing with our families that are taking that move to relocate for a company, and we want to make sure that we can give them the best that they have coming to them. And those are a couple of the things that we watch very, very closely when we're vetting for our partners.
Okay, so if I take into and encompass both of your answers, if I am understanding and hearing this correctly, the more pack and haul capability, the more self-haul capability, and having more locations or dots on a map, so to speak, for storing, all of these components, directly or indirectly, have an impact on the cost of the overall move?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. Do you know, over the last 20 years, we have all seen how the economic state can truly impact this business. Today is even more challenging. First, we had a pandemic. Then that was coupled with this very fast turning real estate market. Corporations and people are paying more than ever for a household good move. Inflation is front and center with us every day. Mike, as it relates to moving and storage, what are you experiencing that impacts this rise in cost?
Sure. I can say, and I think everybody on this call can say, that we're all paying more for goods and services than we ever have before. And that extends not only to our personal purchases, it extends to corporations and government entities. And the moving industry is no exception. I think the first thing everybody thinks about is what they see at the pump. The fuel price is going through the roof, and a lot of people think, well, that could be detrimental to the moving and storage industry. Mm-hmm. But in reality, most carriers have fuel surcharges built into their contracts with their clients. So a portion of those increased fuel costs are covered by way of those surcharges. What isn't covered, and what we're grappling with in the moving and storage industry, is every other part of our service delivery model. Packing material costs have hit historic highs. Insurance costs have jumped 20 and 30% in the last 2 years. Moving equipment like dollies and pads are costing more than ever. We're paying a premium for new truck equipment if we can even get the trucks. And labor costs are through the roof. And specific to labor, there are times when our moving teams go into certain markets and they need to ramp up staffing for origin or destination services. We have certified pools of labor in those markets that they can tap into. And usually the cost is $200 to $250 per day for each staff member. And we're currently paying $400 and $500 a day per person. When you look at all of those factors, the bottom line cost of a move is definitely going to be higher.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just referenced fuel, and fuel can be a major contributor to this cost. I mean, we're paying it ourselves at the pump. Doesn't your industry already have mechanisms in place to really account for these, fluctuations?
We do. It's slightly flawed, I'll tell you. The way we typically account for the fuel surcharge, it's a calculation based off of the national average diesel price, and we capture that information on the 15th of each month, and then we set the surcharge for the next month. So from the 15th of April through the 15th of May, the same surcharge applies. The inherent problem with that model is that any fluctuations after the 15th aren't captured. So if the price of fuel continues to rise, we're trying to catch up in arrears once we reset the surcharge the following month. I think we're going to see some changes in our industry as a result of this. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be surprised if we see more real-time adjustments to the fuel surcharge, or maybe even a weekly adjustment.
Yeah.
But we do have that mechanism in place today. I just think it's going to have to be adjusted.
While you have actually been answering this question on fuel, Mike, we have an attendee that has just asked or is stating, I have more international transfers than domestic. With an international move, do these contributors mirror the spikes in what your industry is faced with? And by the way, thank you for sharing that question.
So a lot of what I've just shared is a lot of the domestic impact. I would actually say that international pricing has been exponentially impacted compared to what we're seeing domestically. The same challenges that I've mentioned about packing materials and labor and equipment all still apply to international service delivery. But there are also additional challenges that we face. We are battling a high demand for overseas shipping containers. We're also seeing companies buy out entire freight ships or freighters for their own goods to be shipped overseas. And it's not like they can create a new freight carrier overnight. Those boats take years and years to build. So it's not a quick fix. You can't ramp up capacity. And we're battling against them for that space. And the other thing that's impacting international shipping is some of the worldly events, like what's going on in Ukraine right now, which could impact the route that we have to send a shipment overseas.
Interesting. So while we're also talking, and I think I'm free to mention his name, Vinny's asking and saying, hi, Kathleen and Mike, thanks for everything you do for our industry. With your crystal ball, when will cost be going back to normal? And in addition, what are some of the actions you have been taking to inform the corporations, proactive communication, updated cost estimates? So he's directing this to you. Thanks, Vinny.
Well, I can tell you, Vinny, I don't know if we'll see a return to normal, but I do think we'll see more stability going forward. And I know I speak for our carrier, our company, but I think I speak for all carriers. We're doing everything that we can to mitigate these cost increases and not pass through anything that we can figure out a way to manage. I think we just have to operate smarter. We have to be innovative. We have to look at alternative methods for transport. How can we, amp up and ramp up our capacity when it's needed, and then still be there when things go a little bit quieter? I think a lot of it has to do with the real estate market. If that tempers down a little bit, then we'll start to see things calm, I think, in the cost arena as well.
Do you have any additional input, Kath? Or I do have another question too.
I see that, and I love that they're coming in. I think I think Vinny's also bringing up an important factor, and that's the communication back to our clients. I think it's really important, on our end. I mean, we get the flow, obviously coming over to our side to kind of pre-alert us to cost going up and things like that. I think it's really important from our end to make sure that we're communicating with our clients and prospects and families on the challenges and the differences going on. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that even in the corporate housing arena when we get to that session of it. We need to educate them, inform them, and make sure that we can give them the best direction on what to do in the future and how it's affecting everybody. So I think, really communication is one of the biggest and strongest things that we need to make sure that we keep that line going.
Key and critical for sure. Now we do have also Debbie Weiner on, and if she is asking if your rate model is based on a single factor rate, and that's an interesting question because I'm asking, is there one now within certain van line systems? Should the fuel surcharge be applied in the same way? And that's like as if calculated as a percentage of the line haul only. Thanks, Debbie.
I believe that it can be, but it really comes down to contract by contract negotiations and what's been determined between a carrier and their client. But in most scenarios that I've seen, it is typically a percentage of line haul.
Okay. And thank you for giving her that feedback and all of us that feedback. So Kathleen, I want to move along on something here because I'm thinking about ways of managing cost, yet not really impacting an employee's experience. You know, we're currently paying, there's a company that's currently paying without any limitations to ship the household good. That company actually came to us and said they were thinking about potentially capping dollars in regards to their forthcoming moves to put on control. What is, you know, your feedback to this methodology? What can you share?
Well, I completely understand probably their direction and maybe a need for that. I would recommend not capping dollars, but actually capping the weight. And the reason being, and the why we would, you know, give them that guidance is that if you have two families with the same type of move, same packing needs, same weight and same size, if one's moving from California over to New York and the other one's maybe moving from Georgia to New York, the costs are going to be higher coming from California over to New York versus the shorter one of Georgia. You would want to make sure that they have the same experiences. And if one, you know, if it's going to cost more, obviously, then they're going to get affected coming from California. So what we would recommend is do it based on the weight. That way it can be equal between the two families. There's a number of different things, you know, one, you know, just in keeping it within policy or policy dynamics, you can restrict items also that and watch that. So, you know, rules of thumb, no lumber shipping, watch the tools. You may even want to watch, you know, what kind of bulky items are going and such. So you'll see restrictions in that area. Other things that we tell them, you know, be proactive on the home finding trip. The sooner that they can find a home and have that checked off their list, then the less need for storage. But, you know, another really great program that we try to promote really strongly is the discard and donate. So that's a really great avenue to sit there and reduce the weight on the household goods shipment and go through everything. You know, do you want to keep it? Did you use it in the last year? And if you didn't, do you really need to move it? And then you can decide on those items if you want to donate them, give them to family, which I'm sure they all love. You know, those types of objects, you know, it's options in reducing down. It saves the company move in dollars, but then also it saves that family from unpacking and moving things. I mean, I'll even say when I moved from from Seattle to Dallas, we went through that. And I think we still even got here and looked at things and decided, why did we bring this? So it's always a really good idea to go by weight and give the family the best experience, and companies can help them with that process too.
And you know, if I recall, discard and donate also bears tax deduction possibilities. The
absolutely
okay. Yeah. Do you know, Mike, I want to come back to you because there are a couple things I want to touch on. First, the word shuttle comes up frequently in move programs. Can you explain exactly what that is and when it is necessary? And are there programs that carriers employ for their clients in regards to this shuttle area?
Absolutely. So for domestic moves, we commonly use 18-wheel tractor trailer equipment. And in the event we cannot get our tractor trailer close enough to a location to safely load or unload a shipment, we are forced to bring in smaller truck equipment to transfer the goods from that location to or from our truck. And that is in fact what a shuttle is. It's the shuttling, the extra handling, the truck to truck transfer of a shipment from one location to where the truck can park. You run into these situations quite commonly in metropolitan areas. So you think New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C., right. Slam dunk, you're going to have a shuttle 9 times out of 10. But then you get into rural areas and you start to look at maps. And there's ways that we can forecast and figure out ahead of time if a shuttle might be needed. In-person surveys work. If we send a representative out to put together the inventory list prior to the move, they commonly can tell us, okay, we can't get a truck up to the home, or it's tractor trailer accessible, things like that. We also utilize Google Maps quite often, but the inherent vice with Google Maps is we might be able to tell that there's space in front of the home for our truck, but not realize that there are low-hanging trees and wires at the entrance of the neighborhood, which would prevent our truck from getting up there. So sometimes a shuttle is prompted by conditions not easily recognized on a map. As part of every shuttle that we perform and most carriers perform, we provide our clients with the reasoning for the shuttle, as well as proof that the shuttle did in fact take place, the truck-to-truck transfer proof. And that's in the form of a weight ticket showing a smaller truck versus a weight ticket showing that a larger truck was also employed on the move. We also can provide truck rental receipts commonly that show when we picked up the rental truck and when we took it back, to show that we used a smaller truck during the course of that order.
So all the support documentation. So again, while you are answering one question, this is kind of like a two-part that popped up. First, third-party specialty services are common during a course of a move. Can you share some examples of when those services could be needed? And, what are they? And are there any avoidance possibilities to what those may be, or at least a way to curb the overall expense?
I think that sounded like three questions, but
Okay.
We'll make it two. All right. So third-party services. In our business, we try to keep our moving teams focused on the core components of a relocation: the packing of the boxes, the loading of the truck, working with the transferee. And we bring in outside technicians or third parties to handle any specialty services. And that's what we're talking about really when we say third-party services.
Right.
These services are dictated by the content of a shipment and are typically identified during the pre-move survey. Some examples include crating of a marble top or a glass top, or disconnecting and reconnecting appliances that a transferee is taking, and commonly televisions that are wall mounted or need to be packed by a technician. When you talk about cost avoidance, I think one of the biggest things that we've been talking with clients about is televisions, because when flat screen TVs came out, there might have been one in every 5 homes, and now you go in and every home has 5, and they're all wall mounted, and they all need to be taken down and hung back up. The reality is that you may end up spending more money to take a television down, pack it, move it, and rehang it at destination than it would cost just to leave the TV at origin and buy a new one for the transferee at destination. So things like that are creative ways that we can work together with our clients to try to mitigate some of the cost. But we feel as though from a third-party service standpoint, it is important for us to keep our teams of movers in the field focusing on the core components of the order and only, and not those specialty services.
So, well, I do have to say that just the coaching on the TV situation, I think that's excellent for cost avoidance, because it could be far less expensive, to your point, than creating several TVs. So, we're talking about these additional services, and that leads me to another question for the RMC side. So, Kathleen, auditing process, what exactly is, there are so many components, and Mike has talked about, support and reasons why, but how are these services and the overall bill actually audited from your side, the RMC?
Yeah, thanks, Bev. It really starts from the estimate. The team is looking over to make sure that these are approved policy components at that time. If there's something outside of the realm of the policy, then looking for an exception in an approval from the account. Then it continues throughout the move. I think everybody can raise their hand that they probably get questions along the way where something pops up and they need to a crating shows up, or not that we've ever had this happen, but all of a sudden there's an additional amount of weight because somebody went and bought all new furniture before the move that wasn't on the estimate. And so things like that need to have approval, then those are going to continue out through the move and be noted properly. Once the invoice comes in, again, we want to match it up to the estimate and then all the exceptions that may have come through the move and make sure that everything's well documented. We're looking for, to make sure all the documents are attached: bill of lading, weight tickets, inventories, and then the accessorial sheet that's going to show the breakdown of all the services that were performed, and again, initialed by the client and the family and signed. And we want to make sure that the weight tickets match, so we always look at the gross and the tier weight, do some of the simple, double check those second set of eyes. But we do expect, our partners to, initial that step before it even gets to us, to make sure. And it's always, if you're in the accounting realm, it's always those extra set of eyes, the double check. And so, Mike, from your end, you have your team there that before they even hit the send and whatnot, what does your team do to make sure that when we receive it on the RMC side, that you're going to have all that attached to it?
Absolutely. And quite frankly, I say that the auditing process of a move starts from the day that we get the initial move order. We're always going back as a carrier and checking what services are pre-approved, what services do we have to seek approval for. And throughout the life cycle of a move, we're constantly going back to the policy matrices, we're going back to the contracts, we're going back to our clients to make sure that we have those authorizations in order. And I think that communication and proper documentation is key to proper billing, to make sure that you have a clean audit, because the last thing that any of us want is inaccurate billing, because it only causes issues for us and for our clients. So we're going through that process from the day we get the order all the way up until that invoice packet is sent, and it is looked at least a dozen times before we send it out.
Agree.
And I know we're kind of running long on this session, but I cannot not throw out this question because it's impacting both of our topics today. The fast turning real estate market, how has that impacted the overall move, Mike, and how that impacts cost?
I would say that the fast turning market is creating situations that is requiring customers and transferees to utilize storage more often than they typically would. You've got situations where transferees cannot line up their closings because they just won't line up, or they can't find a home to move into, and thus they need storage when typically they wouldn't. And I think that the other thing is you're seeing longer durations of storage as well, because people will sell their home at origin, they'll pack and load and go to destination, and it'll take them longer to find the home that they want once they get there. And so the biggest cost impact I'm seeing from the real estate side is the increased prevalence of storage and the increased duration of storage.
Agreed.
So definite impact on overall cost. So, well, I want to take a moment and again, thank you both. The information that you have shared, and I thank those that are in attendance that asked questions, excellent questions, more information that was shared. So moving on to our second topic, and I want to say goodbye, Mike and Kathleen, on the screen anyway, but I know you're here if we need you. So moving on to the actual second topic, I'd like to take a moment to introduce two subject matter experts that are related to the actual corporate housing side that is being impacted. During the challenges that we face today and throughout these last 30 years, I don't think corporate housing has been impacted nearly as much as it has been today. So to really talk about these areas, I'd like to take time to introduce Mary Ellen Daly and Alex Calder. So for those of you who do not know Mary Ellen, she is an award-winning business leader who comes to us with over 20 years of industry knowledge in national and global corporate housing, having worked with industry leaders throughout her career. She recently brought her expertise to rental relocation and Interlink, and we are so happy she's part of this team. I also have with us Alex Calder, and if you've attended any one of our other educational sessions, you will probably recognize Alex as a familiar face. He has a vast and diverse professional background, but the most recent 5 years, he's been sharing his skill as part of the Interlink and rental teams as well. So, hi, Alex, and hi, Mary Ellen. Thanks for joining in here.
Thanks, Bev.
Hey, before we do get underway, I have a question for all of our corporate attendees. Let's call this our first trivia question, okay? Are you ready? What does corporate housing mean to you? Or let me rephrase that. What is your definition of corporate housing? If you would take a moment and in your chat area, Kathleen, do you mind helping me monitor those?
Absolutely. Happy to.
Yeah, let's take just maybe 60, 90 seconds and people start chiming in. I'm starting to see some answers. So as we are all sending in a definition and you're all coming up with some wow, we've got them coming. And I guess I don't really have to resort to something like the Jeopardy theme song while we're finishing up with the responses here. Mary Ellen, I'd like to ask you, you've been in the corporate housing industry for over 20 years. How would you actually respond to this question?
Thanks, Bev. And what a great way to kick off our segment. Corporate housing has definitely evolved over the years. Back when I started in the industry over 20 years ago, corporate housing primarily consisted of the standard traditional furnished apartment. Now, due to next generation and the various challenges we're facing, which we'll touch upon in more detail, we're forced to look outside the box and truly change our overall approach to corporate housing because it literally does embody so much more. And like you said, Bev, there really is no wrong answer.
Right. Do you know, I'd like to try to remove myself from this screen for a minute and focus on our two participants that are our subject matter experts, because, Mary Ellen, that insight of what you just shared is so dramatic and so much different today. So I'm going to go to Alex for something really quick. We heard on the household goods side sort of a state of the union. Can you provide us with something similar in this corporate housing area?
Well, sure. And thanks, Beverly. And hi, everyone. Good to see you again, even though I can't see you. Gosh, where to begin? If you're a corporation, you've got people out and about utilizing any flavor of corporate housing. You're most likely experiencing some sticker shock. Rates are at an all-time high and they're widespread. So most every market is experiencing double-digit rate increases year over year. And in many of these markets, it's exceeding 20, 30, or even higher percent. At the same time, the availability is more scarce probably than it's ever been, which is making it more challenging, more difficult to get close to that office or that job site or that school district that you want to be in. You should be feeling a little bit of both of these, either a little bit or a lot of bit, and probably some of those are extreme situations. And really the root cause is the demand in this industry is far outpacing the supply. You can attribute the imbalance to a couple of driving factors or pressure points that are facing the industry. First and foremost is just that tidal wave in the home real estate market, which is pushing prospective homeowner or home buyers and sellers into the secondary housing space, right? So they're gobbling up hotels and apartments and Airbnbs and any place they can lay their head at night. And more importantly, they're not leaving there because it's so hard to find, so challenging to find that next home. They're staying there longer, and you can probably attest to this just thinking through your temp living benefits, right? So maybe your policy, calls for 30 days or 45 days of temp living, and you're coming to that realization that may not be sufficient in all cases.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So additionally, putting pressure on the industry is just the pandemic in general. And it's really changed kind of that corporate traditional thinking, right, of how things have historically been done. And some examples of that might be, we used to fly the employee back and forth every week. Well, now we're going to put them in an apartment for the duration of the project. Or we were going to relocate this individual. The family had concerns. So instead, we're going to put the employee in temporary housing for, until the dust settles.
Yeah.
And then just the multitudes of occurrences that companies have where they might be bunking people together,
Yeah.
whether we're talking about crew personnel or interns. And because of the pandemic, they've split them apart. So you have the same number of employees, but you're using twice the number of hotels or twice the number of apartments.
Definitely. Definitely.
So then just to kind of round out the demand, you sprinkle in the normal population growth, and then an above average dose of Mother Nature with fires and floods and tornadoes and hurricanes, et cetera. And you can see kind of how this demand is starting to pile up or take shape. At the same time, the supply line, kind of the lifeblood of demand.
Supply chain, right.
The supply line is lagging behind.
Okay.
So the construction industry as a whole is experiencing a significant shortage in labor. Not to mention the delays in the supply chain that Mike referenced in the household goods side of things, right, which is adding weeks and months, to the delivery of materials and lumber and fixtures required to build a new hotel or a new home or a new condo or a new apartment complex. So you got this huge demand on one end, and you've got a lagging supply line. And then lastly, I would just say that the labor shortage has not shied away from this industry. These properties are faced with the same challenges to attract and retain talent that most everybody on the line here can relate to.
And that's a great point, Alex, because it's hitting every industry.
Yeah. So whether you're talking about the front desk clerk at a hotel or the maintenance guy at a apartment complex, those pay increases are reflected in some of these inflated rates that you're seeing.
Well, I just wanted to say this has all been very enlightening, but I'm taking both of your answers. And as we've digested this, I'm going back to the actual trivia question that we asked the attendees. So I guess everybody can tell right here, there's really no wrong answer for anyone who actually responded. And Kathleen has monitored all of those in our chat box. You're all going to be receiving a Starbucks gift card from AFR Furniture Rental. Jen Bafford will be contacting each of you after the event is over and talk about how to arrange getting that gift card to you. So thanks for participating with those questions or those answers. Now, Mary Ellen, going back to questions, you've definitely experienced ebbs and tides over the years, typically impacted by this economy. Do you have any additional thoughts to what Alex may have just said?
I do, Bev. Thank you. So overall, the lack of availability, and let me shed some light on that. There are many factors when there may be limited availability. One specific example I wanted to highlight is the amount of corporate apartments a property can set aside for corporate housing providers. Many apartment communities are only allowed a certain number of corporate leases on site. And once they hit that threshold, they can't accept any more corporate leases, which makes it challenging overall, but especially when working with larger groups. So oftentimes corporate housing providers are asked why the property may be showing availability on their website. And it's important for your provider to clearly communicate why that may not be the case if they have in fact reached that corporate max threshold. As a result, providers are not taking out the inventory because there's just little to be had. Another item I wanted to address is lead times. I recommend that clients provide their corporate housing partner with as much notice as possible when initiating a corporate housing request. Because of the inventory challenges that we're facing, your corporate housing provider needs ample time to research all available housing options to find the best fit for the client. So now more than ever, time is of the essence. And unfortunately, we just don't have the time to sit and mull things over, so to speak. Because of the ever-going lack of inventory and the delay in property response times, I urge clients to secure housing once a viable option is identified and presented. I also recommend that clients get all necessary contracts in place with their provider so that once an option is identified, the process to book the option isn't held up. It's always best to be proactive.
Wow. Now that's a huge point right there, because it's not only giving a provider the lead time necessary as they put out the net for the search, so to speak, but it's also being very timely. It's not taking sometimes the 48 hours have passed for the employee or the corporate person to be making the decision because they are being swooped up like that. So great points, Mary Ellen. Now, I know you touched on this next generation earlier, that next gen of housing. I have two real quick short questions. What type of employee utilizes corporate housing today? And then I guess this isn't a question. Could you kind of walk us through what those options look like and that are available to the market as potentially the right fit to tackle today's environment?
Absolutely, sure thing. So this really addresses changes in traditional thinking that Alex referenced previously. Mm-hmm. In addition to standard corporate apartments, clients need to be open to explore other next-gen or non-traditional types of accommodations, such as extended stay hotels, private rentals, which often include condominiums, townhomes, single-family homes, university housing when appropriate, and web-based rentals, to name just a few. It really comes down to the best fit for the client's specific need and considering more diverse housing options when working with their corporate housing provider. It's critical to work with a provider who can offer more than just a corporate apartment in their portfolio.
It's interesting you just are stating that, and I didn't mean to interrupt, because do all corporate housing partners really search all those models?
In my experience and in my tenure in the corporate housing sector, I can confidently say that there are very few corporate housing providers out there that have the bandwidth to explore and identify those next gen or non-traditional corporate housing options.
Very interesting. And I thank you for that, because sure. You're just a wealth of knowledge.
No. And I didn't want to forget about the second portion of your question, Bev, and that is the type of employees who are utilizing corporate housing today. So exactly. In addition to the standard business traveler, I've seen an influx of intern programs who usually require quantities of housing in bulk numbers. I've also seen leadership rotations and employee relocations, military and government personnel, international assignees are just to name a few, but through the years, the traditional corporate traveler has evolved into so much more.
Yeah, great point. And I want to move back to Alex here now, and I haven't forgotten about you, Alex, by the way. Do you have any additional thoughts here?
I did think you forgot about me. No, I'm just yeah, I do. Well, I do. I would maybe want to make it a little more granular, or take it a little more granular. You can have two employees, same pay grade, same job title. One's going to a big city, one's going to small town USA, and one's going to a resort type area. The other one's going to an industrial type area. One's a renter, one's a homeowner. One's a single individual, and one's got a spouse and 3 kids and 2 dogs and a cat. Mm-hmm. So really it's, outside of today's environment, which is one, that's one part of the discussion. But really having some of these additional tools in your arsenal is a good thing, mm-hmm. right? It can help you combat not only today's environment, but some of these other situations as well.
Mm-hmm. With that, those points are really points that we've talked about, but I'm reading right now something that's coming in. So this attendee is stating, those are great points that you just brought up. You just walked us through all of this. Where does cost factor in? As I have tried to explain to my C-level and justifying nightly rates going as high as $240 a night versus $180 a night in the same market. So can you do that?
Yeah, sure. So, number one, that 180 to 240 is what things look like today, and then that was part of the opening remarks. And it's an unfortunate world we live in. But yeah, the cost factor in similar to those other points. And another thing that I didn't mention was the length of stay. Somebody might be there 15 days or need a housing option for 15 days. The other one might be there for 6 months, right? So all of those things factor in. And again, really what comes to my mind is some of those processes have been developed years ago on how you tackle housing. And in some instances, it becomes almost a cookie cutter approach. So we do it this way and we're always going to do it this way. Well, some of these things that we're talking about in today's environment or beyond today's environment are, looking outside of what you've typically looked at can not only be beneficial for that employee experience, but it can help protect your bottom line.
And that's a great point. So while you've both been answering this question, I do have another Vinny. Hi, Vinny. This says, hi, Mary Ellen and Alex. In regards to alternative options, do you see other corporations, clients using Airbnb, VRBO, etc.? And he goes on to ask, what about the duty of care and letting your employees selecting their own property? He says, I have chatted with many corporate clients in the past, and we are worried about using these alternative options without the appropriate vetting of properties and also being liable if something goes wrong. Thanks. Mary Ellen, I'm coming to you first on this one.
Sure, definitely. So in my experience, when I've talked to clients in regards to Airbnb, they are hesitant because they are non-regulated. And so there's a cause of concern in regards to whether or not someone can gain access to the unit at any given time, or, how will they get the keys, or if there's a maintenance emergency, sort of who do they contact? So the conversations that I've had with my clients is more of a direct approach, like, rather than rule out any option altogether, I'm going to let you make the decision on whether or not you want us to go down that avenue or that path, because you, at the end of the day, are the ones that are responsible for, your clients or your guests in putting in these types of environments. And so it's really not a one size fits all. Some companies do go down that route and some don't.
But so when they're doing that, to couple to Vinny's question before I ask Alex to interject, two things. Are you letting them do them on their own, or are there the companies that will vet, as he asks, properly vet the property and then manage the property and keeping it so the duty of care is complied with?
So in regards to whether a corporate housing provider would, I can speak to the companies that have explored these options. They do the vetting process from beginning to end, just to give the client peace of mind at the end of the day, and to avoid any hiccups down the line.
Okay.
So in that respect, yes. And so I don't know if I've answered that to Vinny's satisfaction, but I'll turn it over to Alex if he wants to add anything to that.
I got a couple of additional comments, and it really is that vetting process, right? And having that checklist. When was the last time you replaced the this and the that? How old are the appliances? What's your process for cleaning the unit? And then typically working, looking for those properties that have a property management company behind them, as opposed to, Bob and Susan on this place. The other piece that I'd reference is just the duty of care, right? Knowing where your people are, and which comes into that lump sum conversation as well. And that's a constant for companies, right? Knowing where their people are, and are they taken care of in the normal course of business. So I don't know that the other one thing I would add to this Airbnb and Verbo conversation is, I don't know that I would hang my hat on it and make it an option one. But when you think about your employees, I can assure you that most of them, if you polled them and said, how many of you use this type of product, a lot of hands would go up. So it's not a stranger to your employee base. It probably leads to some uncomfortability, right, as a company.
Right.
But I think if you're fully going through that vetting process, it is a possible avenue for sure.
And Vinny has chatted something while you're both also giving some great insight to the point of view of the supplier side. He says, I followed this approach, asked the employee to sign a release form, becoming fully liable and released from any involvement from the company or their RMCs. So Vinny, valuable input, and I'm sure that all of our attendees are also making note of that. So I know we're going a little bit long, but I cannot eliminate these next couple of questions as well. Today's talent, harder and harder to really acquire and to maintain. If you're going to retain the talent you find, how does corporate housing really come into play? And let's try to be, as condensed as possible, but still valuable information, Alex.
Yeah. Well, what did you mean by that, Beverly?
Well,
No, I'm just kidding. Today's talent, and it's not only, it's becoming more challenging, but it's that specific talent, right, that you're chasing, and really that you want to retain. And really the thought here is that you can turn corporate housing into, a tool to help in your recruiting process and your retention program. And I'm not saying to disrupt everything and use this kind of thoughts for everybody that's using corporate housing from your company, but who your key people are, who you want to attract or who you want to retain. And there's some things you can do for nominal dollars, right? Adding a cable package or putting a case of bottled water in the refrigerator. And there's hundreds of examples of that, a gift basket or filling up the cupboards with some consumer staples. So also when I'm thinking about today's talent, the remote workforce comes to mind, right? So I know there's companies out there that we've worked with, and I've heard from other companies that are doing this as well, to where, you really need to look into the Wi-Fi and the router and even consider adding an additional room, right? So that you've got a temporary office space, right? Mm-hmm. You can put a desk and an office chair in there, especially if you got two children and you need to close the door at some point. So that would be my thoughts on those.
Okay. And I know we only have 4 minutes left. So those who can remain on, there are a couple more key factors we want to bring out, but we're also going to play some trivia if some can stay even longer. So Mary Ellen, I'm coming to you. What do you recommend to clients who are in need of temporary housing?
Thanks, Bev. So again, just to drive home some key points that I brought up earlier, try to provide as much lead time as possible when a housing need is initiated, and try to be patient with your housing provider, because they're behind the scenes looking for the perfect option for your need. And They're looking to research and identify the best fit for your need. When looking for stays less than 30 days, I recommend companies be flexible and possibly consider extended stay hotel options. And for stays 30 days or longer, explore any and all of the options, whether traditional or non-traditional, because it's not a one size fits all anymore when it comes to corporate housing.
Mhm.
Today's corporate housing encompasses so much more. Thanks, Bev.
Thank you. And Alex, any additional thoughts from you, even including red flags?
Well, I know that people are paying, they're seeing the price at the pump, right? So the rates are going up and the availability is more scarce. I really want to reference what Vinny asked to the household goods side, right? I think it was Vinny. How long is this going to last? How long can we
Mhm.
expect this? And quite honestly, there is no magic wand that's going to shore this up in 3 months, right? So even when things get back to normal from on the home real estate front or on the pandemic front, this is going to linger for years. And yes, I was with an S, Beverly.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think if you get a chance over the weekend or during the next week or two, read up on this labor shortage and this demand and supply, which is impacting both the real estate side and this corporate housing world. It's eye-opening, to say the least. The other thing I would say just about that is it's super easy to raise your price. If you think about the real world for a little bit, it's exponentially more difficult to lower your price. So kind of keep that thought in your mind as well. The other one thing that I would throw in there, and I touched base on it with Benny's question, was the lump sum. We've got trained professionals that are doing this year in and year out.
Mhm.
If you're handling this temporary living or corporate housing with dollars, and again, I'm not talking about disrupting your program, and I'm also not referring to the new hire that's can fit their belongings in their station wagon. It's really that undue frustration that these employees that are having to do it on their own, tackle this by themselves with these rates staring them in the face and this limited availability is very, very challenging and can cause some undue frustration.
Thank you again for joining us. This has been a great event, and we look forward to the next time.